What if I told you that the single most devastating economic collapse in American history, the one that wiped out fortunes, destroyed banks, and plunged millions into despair, began with the decision of one man? October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. In just 6 hours, Americans lost $14 billion, more than the entire Canadian economy was worth at the time. 13 million shares crashed onto the market in a tidal wave of panic. Phone lines jammed, brokers screamed, communication with the exchange cut out, and almost no one realizes that this disaster didn't appear out of thin air. It began 7 months earlier, with a single sentence delivered by a man newspapers affectionately called Sunshine Charlie. This man, Charles Edwin Mitchell, chairman of National City Bank, the most powerful bank in America. And on March 12, 1929, he uttered a phrase meant to save the economy, but instead, it triggered the mechanism that brought it crashing down. Before the collapse, America was living a dream. Ford cars rolled off assembly lines, jazz clubs thumped with life, radios filled homes with new voices, skyscrapers tore open the skyline. The economy seemed unstoppable. But this prosperity had a hidden architect, a man who believed he could rewrite how Americans built wealth. Charles Edwin Mitchell was born in 1877 in Massachusetts, the son of a farmer. Nothing about his childhood suggested he'd become the most influential banker in the country, a man whose decisions would touch every household in America. By 1919, Mitchell became president of National City Bank, today known as Citibank, which then held more assets than the budgets of most nations. And he had a revolutionary idea, one that would change everything. Before Mitchell, stocks were a rich man's game. Only 500,000 Americans owned them, less than 1% of the population. But Mitchell asked, why should only the wealthy be wealthy? In 1920, he launched National City Company, a brokerage that would sell stocks directly inside bank branches. A normal person could walk in to open a savings account and walk out an investor. His salespeople weren't bankers. They were dream sellers, armed with scripts, psychology training, and stories of ordinary Americans who supposedly struck gold in the stock market. Posters showed smiling families with new homes and bright futures. Thanks to stocks, we bought our dream house. But Mitchell's real innovation and the real danger lay in margin lending. Instead of buying stocks with cash, Americans could buy them with credit. Put down 10%, borrow 90%. It was financial nitroglycerin. Between 1925 and 1929, margin loans exploded from $2 billion to $8.5 billion, a 425% increase. Millions of Americans jumped in. Teachers, farmers, mechanics, all convinced they could become rich. The stock market soared. America believed prosperity had no limit. And Mitchell? He basked in the spotlight. In 1928, he earned the modern equivalent of $20 million. Newspapers praised him as the man who made every American a capitalist. But the system he built was a pyramid balancing on a tremor. By early 1929, even optimistic economists were getting nervous. Industrial production slowed, car sales dipped, housing construction stalled, but stock prices kept climbing, far beyond anything the real economy could justify. On February 6, 1929, the Federal Reserve issued a warning: stop issuing speculative loans. Banks were told to limit margin lending before it spiraled out of control. The market panicked, stocks tumbled, billions evaporated. America's first taste of fear rippled across the country. And then, March 12, 1929. Charles Mitchell called a press conference, a moment that would burn itself into history. He said, "National City Bank will provide the market with all the liquidity it needs. In other words, don't worry, I'll save the market." The effect was electric. Newspapers roared, "Sunshine Charlie saves the market." Confidence returned, stocks surged. Within a week, all losses were erased, and the market broke new records. Mitchell had done it. He brought the party back to life. What he didn't realize was that he had also pulled the last pin from the grenade. After Mitchell's pledge, the market entered a state of pure madness. Shoeshiners gave investment advice, secretaries bought fur coats with paper profits, children invested pocket money in stocks. Millions more flooded into the market before the crash. The Dow peaked at 381 points, a record that wouldn't be surpassed for 25 years, but beneath the surface, every dollar invested was backed by just 10 cents of real money. All it would take was a 10% drop to wipe investors out. A 50% drop would drown them in debt. The crash was no longer a possibility. It was mathematics waiting to happen. By fall 1929, big players knew the danger. Industrial output was declining. Borrowed money dominated the market. Margin debt reached record highs. The Fed was preparing to raise interest rates. Joseph Kennedy famously said, "When the shoeshine boy gives you stock tips, it's time to get out." Institutional investors began quietly selling. But in late October, something snapped. Banks learned that the Bank of England was about to raise rates, forcing the Fed to follow. Interest rates plus margin debt equals catastrophe. On the morning of October 24th, New York's largest funds made a decision: sell everything, and the avalanche began. Downgrades, panic, screaming trading floors, margin calls hit like bullets. People didn't have cash to meet them. They were forced to sell, which pushed prices even lower, triggering more margin calls, more selling, more collapse. Banks that issued too many loans started to fall. The very banks that followed Mitchell's margin lending model were the first to die. October 29th, Black Tuesday, the fatal blow. In a single day, America lost another $14 billion. But behind the numbers were real human tragedies. A Detroit mechanic wiped out his life savings and took his life in his garage. A teacher who mortgaged her parents' home for stock investments lost everything. In 1933, Mitchell was summoned to Congress. Senator Carter Glass asked him, "Do you consider yourself responsible for the ruin of millions of American families?" Mitchell replied, "I wanted to give people the opportunity to get rich. No one forced them to buy stocks." But history was already turning on him. Newspapers labeled him the architect of financial catastrophe, the man who stole the future of a generation. Mitchell was charged with tax evasion, $850,000 worth. He resigned in disgrace. He spent the rest of his life in obscurity and died in 1955, never accepting responsibility. Now, here's where we transition to the honest historical nuance. Was Mitchell the only man who caused the Great Depression? No. Economists today agree. The crash had multiple structural causes: an over-leveraged financial system, weak banking regulations, rising interest rates, global gold standard pressures, severe income inequality, overproduction in key industries. Mitchell's decisions didn't solely trigger the Depression, but his policies did accelerate it, magnify it, and lock millions of Americans into a debt-fueled trap that guaranteed disaster once prices slipped. He wasn't the only domino, but he may have placed the final one on the edge. The catastrophe forced America to reinvent its financial system. The Glass-Steagall Act separated investment and commercial banking. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, was created. Margin trading rules became stricter. FDIC deposit insurance protected savers. And yet, today, nearly 100 years later, the warnings echo again. 50 million Americans trade stocks on smartphones. Margin debt is near $900 billion. Apps promise everyone can be an investor. Crypto, meme stocks, leverage, all fueled by the same psychology Mitchell exploited. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes loudly. So tell me, do you think another Sunshine Charlie moment is coming? Or have we learned nothing from 1929? Let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe for more deep dive documentaries, and I'll see you in the next story.